With deaths peaking over 1,000, an international health emergency declared over West Africa by the World Health Organization, all eyes are on the continent. Now, to what extent are systemic issues to blame, and how can they really be rectified? Robtel Neajai Pailey, PhD candidate at SOAS, University of London and Liberian native, joins me now in a Guardian piece. You spoke very vividly about dead bodies being left on the streets, people being afraid to even go to the health centers to get help and hide instead in their homes with their families because they just didn't trust the infrastructure that was put in place. That is a serious crisis of confidence that exists in the country. How do you even move forward when you've got that sort of a situation and a highly infectious disease we're talking about?
It's incredibly demoralizing for the government to announce on the radio that it's an international health crisis. People must listen to the government, they must listen to the safety precautions, and ask people to take patients to the hospital. And when patients arrive, they've been turned away.
Now, we of course have these sobering statistics that just came out from the World Bank. You know, we know this is not just Africa's problem, but this is a problem that the world really needs to take issue with. According to the World Bank, you know, the low Ebola scenario is that lost GDP for West Africa, $2.2 billion in 2014 and $1.6 billion in 2015. The high, even worse, $7.4 billion in 2014, $25.2 billion in 2015. Now, according to the World Bank statement, the problem is not that they can't keep up with the immediate problems on the ground, but this is the larger business implications that we're talking about, or aversion behavior by people who are investing in the country. I mean, they don't even want to go in, they don't want to leave with any of the products from the country. We are seeing a continent that is more interconnected than ever before in terms of its investment behavior. Now let's talk about the topple effect that this situation is going to create for markets all over the world.
Countries within the sub-region are sort of realizing that ostracizing and completely isolating these countries isn't going to help them, because it has implications beyond just the three countries that are affected globally, where concession companies or investors are saying, well, this is a West African crisis and therefore we can't trade with these countries because there might be Ebola, cases.
But, we're talking beyond the regionals, as you said, about the broader implications. If we see a rupture of the financial markets that are integrated, and as a result, it's really all over the world in just a few days. I'm not trying to fearmonger, but what I am trying to say is that these broader implications then mean what? Does that mean that the foreign governments have to pour more money to solve this situation, try to mitigate the risk? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that's a part of it. And I think even the World Bank has introduced somewhat of a stimulus package for Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, so that the broader implications of the outbreak on their economies it doesn't lead to complete collapse and fragility. That's a welcome solution. And the World Bank is even saying that we've got to do a lot more than the initial 20 million that we talked about, because the economies have pretty much come to a standstill. We have to find other mechanisms to ensure that there's not complete economic collapse. I mean, even talking to family members on the ground now, or people who are petty traders involved in informal work can't sell their market just because they're so fearful of going out, and people are not even buying their wares. Farmers are not going to the farm. Commodity prices are increasing, and I'm thinking about the instability that this is causing for local households who aren't able to even sustain themselves. I mean, it's quite alarming.
It is. Let's go back to the idea of building this infrastructure, health infrastructure. What obligation do these foreign firms have, given that they are coming in and they are helping to reap the economic benefits for the government as well as for themselves? But there's people on the ground. We have to make sure they're taken care of. If the governments aren't doing a satisfactory enough job, whose responsibility is it to make sure that healthcare reform is in fact enacted swiftly?
Sure, it is the government's responsibility. I think the private companies, they can only follow the government's lead.
So do you think the government should hold them more accountable?
Absolutely,
the government
as I
should
mentioned
say,
before.
You guys are coming in, let's talk about these deals that we're making with you, and we want to make sure that these deals are more balanced.
Absolutely, and I think the Liberian government, as I mentioned, with the county development funds and social development funds, this is something that the Liberian government introduced. It wasn't concession companies saying that, oh, we have a corporate social responsibility and therefore we will. The government said, no, this is our expectation of you. You're going to export our natural resources and you have to invest back in the people. Again, they haven't held their feet to the fire in ensuring that they do invest in the people in healthcare and education.
Now let's think about some of the FTSE companies that, of course, ascribe to the belief that they should be engaging in corporate social responsibility tactics, and that's part of the boxes that they tick off when they're promoting themselves internationally. What does that then do to enhancing the ability of the local governments to hold these companies accountable?
Well, I think part of it is that, you know, the CSR, the corporate social
Right.
responsibility, has become sort of rhetorical, and it's not, in actuality, reality on the ground. It's not having the impact that it should.
But companies are using it as a measure of, look, we're going into your region, your continent, and this is what we're giving back. So you're saying that it's not making any difference on the ground?
Well, I'm saying that in terms of reality, from what I've experienced in Liberia, those investments are actually not trickling down. There was a conference in Abuja, Nigeria in 2001. All the African Union governments decided to sign a declaration called the Abuja Declaration, and it basically implored, it sort of ensured that they would invest in healthcare. And they also asked for donors to ensure that most of the aid coming in would go towards healthcare finance. There have been 26 countries that have increased healthcare financing in the past 11 years. Liberia is among them. Obviously, still more needs to be done.
Robtel, you are a smart, dynamic woman. Obviously, you are able to leave the country, get educated, and then, you know, impart wisdom on the rest of the world on what needs to happen locally. What is it like for you to see your brothers and sisters back home dealing with these systemic issues, unable to move forward?
It's very disheartening, actually. I mean, I think the only thing that's keeping me from wallowing in despair and disillusionment is the fact that I speak to my father every day, and he's a glass half full kind of individual. He always says, you know, we're okay, we're praying, we'll get through this, it's just a matter of time. And my question is, how many people have to suffer in the process before we get through this? We have so much more work to do post-Ebola.
Well, you're part of that change. Robtel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.